I mean, this is a theme that's played over and over again, and it's based upon the support that is provided. The first decisive action, of course, was the the counterattack that took place in the fall of 2022, that you know allowed Ukrainians to recapture most of Kharkov, drive the Russians out of the right bank of Kherson, etc. But that led to a Russian reaction. And so the next decisive action to end this war was the counteroffensive of 2023, the summer counteroffensive, where Ukraine literally bled to death in the fields of Zaporizhia, outside of Bakhmut, in Avdiivka, and other places, as that failed. And now, their next one was, help us defend against the Russian attacks. That's failed. The decisive action right now isn't on the battlefield. Ukraine's run out of infantry, and there's nothing the West can do to save that. Ukraine, is running out of equipment. The Western arsenals are empty. The decisive action now hinges on Ukraine's ability, according to Zelensky, to inflict harm on Russia strategically. To be able to strike deep inside Russia, to strike command and control, logistics, communications, military production, etc., deep inside airfields, oil production, oil storage, to inflict strategic harm on Russia, so as to break the spirit of Russians to continue this war, and they will put political pressure on Putin, and Putin will then come crawling to the negotiating table and accept the peace dictated by Ukraine. It's a fantasy. It's ridiculous. I mean, anybody who studies the history of Russia understands that Russia was part of a Soviet Union, the most important component of a Soviet Union that took 27 million casualties to defeat Nazi Germany. I'm not saying that Ukraine's capable of inflicting that kind of damage, but whatever Ukraine thinks it can inflict, it isn't going to change the outcome. It's only going to harden Russian resolve. But the dangerous part is that Ukraine needs the West to provide it. Ukraine can't do this on its own volition, and therein lies the problem, that if the West does provide Ukraine with this capability to achieve this decisive victory, they become a party to the conflict, and Russia's put the West on notice. That means that Russia will strike them, that this will stop being a special military operation, this will transition into open warfare, and this will turn into a nuclear conflict, and we all die. It's that simple. So everybody who listens to Zelensky should just understand that because he can't do this on himself. He's a defeated, I can't even call him president anymore, because he's lost all legitimacy, because he is, foregone electoral processes. Even Ukrainians start to say, who the hell are you to dictate these solutions to us? The Ukrainian people haven't spoken. You're not the president. That's not our parliament. We've got problems. He's losing support at home. This is an act of desperation, which is literally collective suicide. This is a man who is so desperate to remain in power, so desperate to buy into the notion of victory that he's been told, guaranteed by the West. I mean, Olaf Scholz, we will be with you until the end. But now Olaf Scholz saying, well, the end is going to be a negotiated settlement where you have to accept Russia holding on to territories. This is suicide. Collective suicide. It'll be the end of us all. It will be a nuclear war. Again, I promote Annie Jacobson's outstanding book, Nuclear War Scenario. It's on the bookshelf behind me. I bought it this past weekend and read it cover to cover twice, and I'm going to read it again because I have to. I have to scare myself to death before I go to bed every night to continue to maintain the sense of urgency in trying to stop a nuclear war. Zelensky is about creating the conditions for a nuclear war. That's it, plain and simple. That's the only way he can get out of this problem, is to take everybody else down with us. And he's at that point, this final act of desperation. And I would hope that the West would see through this. I would hope the American people would see through this and understand that if you support Ukraine today, if you continue to support Ukraine, it means that you want to commit suicide. It'll be an act of collective suicide. I'll just remind Stoltenberg, I mean, and everybody who listens to him as if he has any credibility, go back to 2014. You had Maidan, which is a CIA brokered Nazi coup d'etat. literally. We now know that it was the right sector snipers up on the roof killing their own people to try and pass the blame to the Russians. We know that. There's no debate about that. We know what happened. We know how the CIA backed this up. We know how the United States handpicked the government of Ukraine, and we know for what reasons the CIA establishing bases on the border with Russia, the whole thing. But it led to a conflict with the Russian-speaking people of the Donbass, backed up by the Russian military, that resulted in the Ukrainian army being surrounded. And Vladimir Putin was in a position at the end of 2014, early 2015, where he could have removed Ukraine from the face of the planet, because the Ukrainian army at that time wasn't this massive NATO-built army, and its best fighters were surrounded in the Donbass, and they were all going to die. And Vladimir Putin was in a position to order their deaths. This is where France, the President Hollande, and Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, came crawling to Putin, begging, please don't kill them. Please don't do this. Please, let's have peace. And Putin agreed. He's regretted this decision. He said, I could have ended it all right then. I could have eliminated the Ukrainian army. We never would have had to worry about any of this. Because if you eliminate the Ukrainian army, everything else collapses. And then you would get a pro-Russian government. Maybe even Viktor Yanukovych could have returned to Kiev. But instead, he opted for the Minsk peace process. And then for 8 years, he stood by while NATO retrained. But the point in bringing this up is, what does Stoltenberg think was going to happen in 2014? What weapons could you have provided, Stoltenberg? This is the insanity of somebody who has forgotten history and is ignorant as the day is long. The notion that NATO could have done a damn thing in 2014 to change this outcome is absurd. Russia defeated the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army was surrounded. They were all going to die. And they only lived because Vladimir Putin bought into the lies of the West, that they were honestly going to try and achieve a peace that would be equitable for all parties. That's one of Putin's rare mistakes. And it wasn't a mistake at the time. It was the right decision at the time. But now that he's been lied to by the West, you really think he's going to be inclined to sit down and negotiate with them again? Not on your life. Not after losing as many people as he has in this war. Not after the suffering of the Russian people. Not after sacrifices they've made. This war will end in a decisive Russian victory. That's the only outcome there. And Stoltenberg can try and reinvent history all he wants, but anybody knowledgeable of the actual facts on the ground know that Stoltenberg is lying about everything.
Okay, thank you, Scott. So, one question from the viewer. I will justify my own question for this question because we don't have enough time. Scott, what does it mean, I think? What does it mean that Biden changed plan and don't go to Europe-Ukraine meeting, I think? And Blinken was brought back home from Asia, not to the Ukraine meeting. Thank you for your question, by the way.
Well, it's a good question. The United States is abandoning Ukraine. The Ukraine meeting was supposed to be at the 25th meeting of the Ramstein Contact Group, where, Ukraine, together with Great Britain, wants to put pressure on the United States to sign off on the release of the Storm Shadow missiles and the TACAM missiles that can be used to attack Russian targets. I think Biden understands, he was told in no uncertain terms by the Russian government, that Russia will retaliate and that America doesn't get to sit and, separated by two oceans and pretend that there will be consequences. Anatoly Antonov said that if this thing goes nuclear, the nuclear conflict will not be confined to Europe, that America will be struck. And I think the Biden administration has woken up to that reality. So there will be no continuation of this. I think right now, rather than continuing to feed the fantasies of Zelensky, which is all these meetings do, is they sort of justify Zelensky. Zelensky's now, in 10 Downing Street meeting with Keir Starmer. And it's like, feeding the fantasies. He comes out with these illusions of grandeur. It's like Hitler again in the bunker in that in the classic movie Downfall, where Hitler's moving imaginary armies and he's going to win the war because he could draw an arrow and say Steiner's going to come here, and the generals are sitting there going, there ain't no Steiner. Steiner doesn't exist anymore. Wenck isn't there. Ninth Army doesn't work. And right now Zelensky's being told that Steiner's coming to his Wenck's army. The Ninth Army is coming. That's my next interview, but they're just going to have to wait. And I think what Biden is doing is putting a marker down, saying, stop it, stop feeding the fantasy. We need to inject reality here. Zelensky has to stop believing that there's going to be a battlefield solution. There is no battlefield solution. It's a diplomatic solution, and Zelensky has to get on board with this. And so we're just going to stop feeding the fantasy. And I think that's why he's not going to meet in Europe.
Thank you so much, Scott. Apparently, Hitler survived, and he had a longer life in Argentina. So I just wonder what's going to happen to Zelensky if he's going to escape to, I don't think to Argentina.
I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows?
Trotsky fled to Mexico, and eventually a Soviet agent got next to him, put an ice pick in his brain. Zelensky will not die an old man in a rocking chair, having lived a long and fruitful life. Zelensky will die a scared man. Let's just say that he will suffer the fate of Stepan Bandera. Wherever he runs, they will get him. And at some point in time, he's going to be walking up the stairway to his apartment, and somebody's going to get him and shoot him or poison him or kill him. But that's his fate, and it's one that I can't say that he doesn't deserve. I'm not condoning it. I'm not asking for it. I'm just saying that that's the inevitability of Zelensky and his cronies. They will not die old men.